Continuing on with our terrestrial planets. Sorry about that, but I ran out of time on my last video. We left off with this poor soul, le gentil is what they called him, the gentle. And his story was this. He was a French expedition leader, and he was sent in 1760 to go to the French colony of Pondicherry in India's southeast coast to watch and record the transit of Venus. When he reached the French island of Mauritius, which is right here in the Indian Ocean, he learned that the British had invaded Pondicherry, up here. So he waited, got a nasty case of dysentery, and he finally got a lift from a French warship that was going to try to fight off the British. They left on March 11th, and the transit was going to occur on June 6th. They were blown off course for weeks by monsoon winds, which was followed by persistent calm seas. They finally reached the coast of India May 24th, but the captain learned that Pondicherry had fallen to the British, so they sailed back to Mauritius. Sadly, they did not make it in time for the transit, which Le Gentil saw in clear skies while bobbing around in the ocean. It was of no scientific value because he didn't know his exact position. In particular, he didn't know his longitude. Back on Mauritius, he decided that he would wait the 8 years until the next transit, and he would study the flora and fauna and geology of Mauritius and nearby Madagascar. He eventually decided that Manila, the capital of the Philippines, would offer a better chance for clear skies. He got a ride on a Spanish warship in 1766. 11 months later, he received orders from France to return to Pondicherry. And so that's what he did. He arrived in 1768, and he spent a year setting up his observation platform and taking preliminary measurements. Sadly, as he was about to measure the transit on June 3rd, 1769, a cloud appeared in front of the sun and covered the transit from view. He also learned that in Manila, in the Philippines, the skies were perfectly clear on that day. It was 2 weeks before he could hold a pen and write his friends in Paris. Following another bout of dysentery, he returned to Mauritius, where he watched a valued colleague die of tropical fever. And then he headed towards France. However, a terrible storm broke his ship's mast and forced him back to Mauritius. Finally, he caught a ride on a Spanish warship, which would take him only as far as Cadiz, Spain, right here at the very tip of the continent. From there, he had to walk back to Paris by foot. That's over 1,000 miles. The worst part of the story is that because no one had heard of him for almost 10 years, he had been denounced as a deserter, his possessions sold off, and his wife remarried. All in the name of science. We're moving on to Mars. We're skipping Earth because we're going to spend the rest of the semester talking about Earth. So Mars is called a red planet, and even if you look at it in the night sky, it looks red. Its atmosphere is very thin, and it's primarily made of carbon dioxide. It has cold polar temperatures, minus 193 degrees Fahrenheit. And the polar caps are H2O ice and a thin layer of frozen carbon dioxide. There are also extensive dust storms with winds up to 270 kilometers per hour. Now, if you've read the book The Martian or seen the movie, apparently the dust storms that set off the entire chain of events are one of the few things that aren't scientifically accurate about that depiction of Mars. Apparently the winds that are in that story are much greater than they really would be. Mars has 2 moons. I didn't mention moons of Mercury or Venus because they don't have any. The 2 moons of Mars are called Phobos and Deimos, and you don't have to learn those names, but what I would like you to know is that these were captured asteroids. These were asteroids that were zipping around in the early solar system, and they were gravitationally attracted to Mars and pulled into orbit. This is very different than the formation of Earth's moon, which we'll talk about in a few videos. Here's a view of Mars's North Pole. This is frozen carbon dioxide on top of frozen water. Mars has numerous large extinct volcanoes, and in fact it has the largest volcano in the solar system, called Mons Olympus. It's shown here with a trace of Arizona over the top of it to give you a feel for the size. There are also some very large canyons on Mars, and one of them is named after the Mariner spacecraft, and it's called the Valles Marineris. It is the largest canyon on Mars. If we take a look at this computer-generated image of Mars, which has color indicating elevation, this is that huge canyon, Valles Marineris. In terms of its length, this would stretch across the entire United States. Here's that volcano, Olympus Mons. One of the really fascinating things about Mars is an abundance of evidence that water once existed on the surface of Mars. There are stream drainage patterns that have been found in the past few decades. There are no surface bodies of water, but the existence of these drainage patterns suggests that maybe in the past there were rivers and surface water. Here are two photos. This is showing the top of a cliff, and then downslope is in this direction. And so these look very much like drainages that form from water in Earth. This one's even more convincing. Here we have kind of a mesa or a plateau, and another one on this side, and then this is a low between them that looks very much the way a river would carve into the land on Earth. Mars has had some really exciting visitors from Earth. In 2004, the twin rovers Spirit and Opportunity landed on Mars. They were built to last 6 months. And if you look at the statistics here, Spirit lasted 6 years, Opportunity lasted a little more than 14 years. The scientists at JPL, down the street from Pasadena City College, were very excited. In 2012, Curiosity landed, and this is a self-portrait of Curiosity, and a little more than a month after it landed, it found additional evidence for water on Mars, which are these features in the rock called crossbeds. They look like lines, but they're the kind of feature that we see on Earth that's formed from running water. And then these were turned into solid rocks by processes that create sedimentary rocks. What would Mars have looked like with water? Well, this is the cover of a Sky and Telescope magazine from 2013, and it shows what Mars might have looked like with water on the surface. So what's going on right now? Well, right now, there's a mission called Mars 2020, and it's on its way to Mars. It's going to land on February 18th, 2021. And inside Mars 2020 is a rover called Perseverance. And this rover looks something like this. It's going to study Martian life. It's going to take samples that will eventually be returned to Earth for the first time. And it's also going to carry the very first helicopter. This is a snapshot of the solar system. Here's the sun, there's the position of Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And Mars 2020 shows the current position of the satellite leaving Earth and heading to Mars and arriving there in February. Coming up next, the gas giants.